it's really impressive that those speakers lasted you for 10 years. I wonder if that has anything to do with the fact that at least when I was at your place a couple weeks ago, I noticed that when you were working on music, you listened to music at a very low level,
Yeah,
which you
man.
recommend in your courses. Like when I took your course, your Hyperbits class, you recommended that. And I don't take that advice because I just like, I get too tempted and I want to listen to it loud, but I feel like you're really disciplined about that. Maybe that's why your speakers lasted for so long.
Maybe. I mean, don't get me wrong. I definitely occasionally like to just turn it up and like hear that the full impact of the music that you're creating, because it feels so much better to listen to it loud. But yeah, man, listening at like, if you can make your song sound good at low volumes, it'll sound amazing at loud volumes. So I try to be disciplined about it. Just like I try to be
Right.
disciplined about everything in life, but
Right.
it only works
Yeah,
like
totally.
once in a while.
Yeah, well, one thing you told me that when I was at we started recording, by the way. It's just like a
Oh yeah.
conversation, basically.
Yeah,
So,
let's just do
but
it. Let's go.
yeah. But so, and I'll give a proper intro, like about you and who you are, separate from the podcast. But like as an intro to the podcast. But I was at your place for the listeners. You live in San Diego, and I came and visited you a couple weeks ago, and I was asking you about discipline because I feel like you, at least from my perspective, are a very disciplined person, and you're running your own business, education business, and you have those skills. And you said something really interesting to me that I remember, which was you were like, "Well, I'm actually like kind of lazy, so I just need to kind of like force myself to do things and like stay on track." And I don't know if like I feel like that was you kind of being humble about the fact that you are really disciplined, but even in taking your class, like everything is very well organized, and even the way you were describing to me like how you run your business and how everything's delegated. So do you feel like that's a skill that you have cultivated over time, or is it something more innate, or is it a combination of both?
It's probably a little bit of a combination of both, but I definitely feel like it's more innate. And maybe this is like partially, like I have this like perpetual state of like just a little bit of anxiety, almost always. So I
Right.
wonder if like my ability to be disciplined is just me avoiding like that feeling of letting go or feeling out of control. Because there's
Mm.
like what is it? I think like Anthony Bourdain had like, I don't even know if he actually said it, but there's like a quote, like a meme or something going around. Like when he passed, and it said like the worst version of myself like wants to sit around and do drugs and watch cartoons and smoke weed all day, but my entire life is a system to get myself to like not do that. And I
Mm.
really related to that because I was just like, I was reading that and I was like, man, like I would love to just sit around and like, I don't know, eat a lot of delicious like, food or something, and just like hang out or drink alcohol and like do the things that I think, yeah, like on a human level would be considered quite lazy. But
Mm.
but I also end up feeling like so much worse when I do that. So my whole life I feel like is just an attempt to like not let myself go down that path, because I think we've all been there where like specifically that week in between like Christmas and New Year's where like nothing in the world is happening, and like I've done it. I've literally sat down and watched TV and shows for like 5 days in a row, eating like chocolate and like ordering Indian food, which I know I'm obsessed with. And like, dude, coming out of that, I hated myself. I absolutely hated myself. So like, I think maybe that is part of the motivation for yeah, trying to be disciplined. And yeah, that paired with the fact that I think my dad is just like a hard worker, so there's something in the Slobodsky genes maybe that just like, yeah, we just like to like work, man. Like we just like to get shit done.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a good opportunity to take it back a little bit. And like I said, I'll record an intro, but just for the people who are listening, the way that we met is I took an online production class from a school that you run called Hyperbits, which is also your artist name of your artist project. And that class totally changed my life. I mean, it was before I took that class, I was trying to make music and I had a lot of really cool ideas and creative ideas. I'm sure any producers or artists out there listening can relate, but I just didn't have the technical skills. And I remember taking your class, and one of the it was either in the marketing that I saw before I signed up, or one of the maybe like the intro orientation video, where I remember you were saying that, it took you all these years of combing through YouTube tutorials that are obviously at varying levels of quality and accuracy in terms of the information to distill everything down into this class. And I just remember being so grateful that this existed, and also being really impressed that you had the tenacity to do that. And then later found out that a lot of that process that you were doing happened while you were working a full-time 9 to 5 job that you eventually left. And I want to just talk a little bit about those earlier days, if we can take it back to those early days when before you knew that this was going to be a business, maybe even back when you were just trying to do your artist project as Hyperbits, and just talk about like that progression from having a 9 to 5 job, having this dream to be an artist, and in many ways maybe achieving that to some level, and then how you went from there to becoming a business owner and an educator that you are now.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think that, like, I mean, we had talked about this at one point last year. I think like the best, or the thing that matters the most in terms of like making progress in life is having to go through some form of suffering. And for me, that was like, you know, being at a 9 to 5 job that I absolutely hated. Like, I genuinely did not want to wake up in the mornings. I just wanted to snooze my alarm. I would go to work and sit in this like beige gray cubicle with like, walls super high. There's nobody around me. Like, uh, the people that I worked with, I wasn't super, you know, friendly with. It's just people that I wouldn't have hung out with otherwise. Um, and I learned a lot at that job. I definitely like feel like it wasn't like all negative, but I
What was that
genuinely
job? What was that job, Serik? Just
it
so
was a
people know.
pharmaceutical conference marketing job. So I was in charge of selling tickets to these like high end conferences. So,
Mm.
people from like Pfizer would attend like a drug delivery, like niche pharmaceutical event of some sort, where there'd be a lot of like partnerships being done or educational type sessions being held. And I didn't really know that much about healthcare or pharmaceuticals. And I was just like in this world that at the end of the day was very much just a paycheck. And I couldn't believe that I had been working, essentially my whole life, right? To go through like elementary school, middle school, high school, college, to get to this point where I was like, wait, like, this is it? Like, I'm just working for someone else and just getting a paycheck and I'm not happy. And I also had a very different mindset at that point. I had a very fixed mindset. I didn't know that there was, possibilities to do anything else. I was just like, oh, like, this is it. Like, you just get a job and then you like, drink on the weekends and have fun. And that would literally, I think that was what I thought I was going to be going to do for like the rest of my life.
Mm.
Um, and I feel like I guess my desire to just like combat that, right? Almost like survival. Like, I have to do something that's more fun than this. I have to find a way to like enjoy life. And I started listening to podcasts and I started like getting really into entrepreneurship and into music. And I basically just was yeah, just learning, teaching myself how to make music on a computer. Cause up until that point, I had done everything electronically. I played like some guitar, like I was in a punk band in high school. And yeah, I decided to take a class um, called Dubspot, which is like an electronic music production school in New York City.
Hell
Um,
yeah, I did Dubspot as well. That's funny.
oh, did you?
Back in the day, yeah, like
Oh, I
I
didn't
mean
know that.
years ago, right? Like
Yeah.
2003. I mean it's like shut down now, but yeah, years
Yeah,
ago.
I think there was some issues with like people not getting paid or something, but yeah,
Right.
like so
Surprise, surprise in the music industry.
yeah, totally. And so I basically like signed up for this class and I was super, super stoked about just like starting, something that I was super passionate about. I had already been producing music for maybe a couple of years, like a year or two, just like, hobby for fun. Um, and the start of classes at Dubspot was the same day as one of the events that I managed, which was an event down in Florida. And it was my job with the company to go down to this event and just like be the marketing guy, like, you know, show face, do some networking, create some media partnerships, all sorts of like little things, you know, like I had a lot of, I guess, responsibilities. I mean, I was the marketing manager of the event, and I still can't believe I did this. I went to my boss and I told her, um, I was like, listen, I got into this like really prestigious music production school, and the first day of classes are actually, you know, same dates as this event in Florida. And I was like, I can't attend.
Mm.
And she looked at me like literally her jaw like dropped. She didn't even tell me. She was like, okay, we'll talk about this later. And then she called me back into her office like a week later, and she was just like, Serik, like, I am so disappointed in you. Like, she really reamed into me, you know, I guess just expressing her discontent and her shock of the fact that I would choose essentially a hobby, a passion of mine, though, over, you know, attending an event, you know,
Mm.
over in Florida, in Orlando or something. Um, and then they fired me a week later, and I was like, I was just like, okay. And at the time, I actually thought it was one of the best things that ever happened to me because, like, and it definitely was. But I basically, yeah, I got to collect unemployment for a few months and just decided right then and there, I was like, I can't go back to being that like miserable person. Like, life is too short.
Mm.
There's no amount of money that is worth doing something that makes me feel like a shell of myself.
Mm.
And so yeah, I just decided right then and there, I was like, I'm going all in on music. And yeah, I just kind of like never looked back from that point on. And I took the dubspot course. Um, and then like after that, I met a bunch of people like kind of in the industry. I was like producing a lot, and I didn't really get like a quote unquote break until maybe like a year and a half, 2 years after that, where like Carnage, like the DJ, uh, played one of my remixes at some festival, and then a bunch of A&Rs in New York City started hitting me up, like expressing interest in wanting to manage me.
Mm.
Um, which yeah, what like was kind of my in initially, and then like from that point on, they helped me grow my artist project. They hooked me up with a bunch of like engineering opportunities with some of the major labels, and yeah, man, I kind of like just went all in on music from that point on.
Mm. Yeah, and yeah, I want to talk dive a little bit more into, you know, I mean, for anyone listening, like you kind of gave like a summary and almost like a very quick like recap of that whole process, but I just want to like emphasize that a lot of people probably would have like may have a similar story where like it doesn't end with getting those opportunities, or especially like engineering opportunities. So, you know, like during that time, I mean, before you decided to make the decision to uh basically like not go to the conference and go to Dubspot instead, how like far along would you say, looking back, you were in your actual production skills? Like, did you feel like you were already pretty confident, or was it more like a roll of the dice where you were like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I just need to follow
Yeah.
this instinct kind of thing, you know? Or were you like, no, this is 100% the right thing, like I hope I get fired because like that's what I, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I had enough naivete and confidence to think that my stuff was pretty fire, you know? I was like, yeah, I'm making some good stuff. And in
Right.
retrospect, it was awful. Like it was really bad. I mean,
Right.
I always had a sense of like musicality because I was in a band, right? And growing up, like my family's always been fairly musical. Like my mom plays a bunch of instruments. Like I grew up playing guitar and some drums and things like that, so I could like sit down at a DAW and do things that a lot of people who didn't have that musical background, you know, could achieve. And I think that that initially made me more confident than I was, or that I
Mm.
actually deserved to be, because, you know, I could write a song. It wasn't the craziest concept to me, but the technical side, right? The science of music production, like how do you get your stuff to sound as good as the people that you look up to? Um, that world, what I was completely unversed in, and it wasn't really until Dubspot and then just like collaborating with students and really my own like hunger and desire to learn that stuff. Like I ended up loving that stuff the most, so I
Right.
got really really into it. And then as my music started to improve, I think that's when like those opportunities started to present themselves, is once I took like the technical side and the engineering side a lot more seriously. It's kind of like getting out of the resume pile, right? Like you can write a
Mm,
great song, but if it doesn't have that shine and that polish and that like commercial viability to it, like a lot of people will disregard it. And
right.
yeah, I kind of just became like obsessed, and I realize in retrospect now that I do have a little bit of a obsessive personality. Like when I get into things, like I get into things, you know.
Right.
And yeah, making my music sound professional became like my number one obsession for like probably 3 to 4 years or so.
Mm. Yeah, and I think I wanted to just like dive a little into this idea of having that quote unquote delusional confidence in yourself or in your abilities, because I think that especially in things like art or just entrepreneurship, even like things that have uncertainty baked into them, I feel like with so many successful people that I like listen to or meet or talk to even personally, that seems to be a common thread where people really feel like they just believe that they can do it. Like either they believe they have an internal, like an innate talent level for it, like maybe how you felt with songs based on the fact that you had this musical background. You're like, yeah, I can write a song. Like, why can't I? Like, if someone else can do it, I can do it. But then even the confidence to the humility to realize that, okay, yes, I can write a song and I have the art side down, but the science part of it I need to work on. But then the confidence to know that if I apply myself, I can get there. I can actually get there and make it happen. And I was reading your before we hopped on this call, I was just reading I mean, I don't know how long ago you wrote this, so like hopefully most of it's still relevant, but I was reading like the manifesto on the Hyperbits website and your little like your note that you have for students that are like exploring whether they want to take the class. And you said something about, you said, and it starts with an artist who just happens to love to teach. And then there is a section in there where you're like, my parents were teachers and my sister is a teacher, and so it's in my blood. And I almost, after hearing you talk about the delusional confidence with music, it almost feels like that also translated into you eventually starting this school. um, do you think, like, do you feel like that confidence, I'm just fascinated by this because so many people I meet seem to have, who are doing well, seem to have this just like belief in themselves. It's like a self-esteem belief or confidence. Do you think that that's something that you've always had, like just that belief of like, I can do this, like if other people can do this, I can do this? Because I think that holds so many people back, especially artists and entrepreneurs who are trying to do something that isn't, the known path or known route.
Yeah, that's hmm. I mean, it's interesting that you use the word self-esteem, because I don't feel like I've ever really had a large, healthy sense of self-esteem. But I often have had a decent amount of confidence, I guess, in myself. Um, but yeah, man, I don't know. Like it's hard to look back and and see myself as someone who was just like, who always thought that they could do it, and yet I did have that feeling, and I don't really know why, to be
Mm,
entirely honest. Like I did feel that way. I did feel that I could achieve something. Like that was never really the issue, but I think, I don't know, man, there was like, I didn't have a crazy sense of like confidence in a lot of other areas of my life. Um, but I think maybe to go back to like when I was saying, like suffering kind of sheds a lot of like maybe new perspective, or helps you like align yourself with maybe what really matters. I think just how much I hated my job was enough to make me think like, it doesn't matter what the end result was. And I was also searching for this information. I was looking for information that would support me in my journey. So like whether that was like listening to like, I don't know, inspirational videos on YouTube, or listening to podcasts, or like even listening to like graduation speeches from like really successful people. Everyone just said like, you seem to like, you have to have that confidence, but at the end of the day, like it's about hard work. And if there's one
mm,
thing that I felt like my superpower was like, I can put my head down and get to work like longer and harder than anybody else. Like I'm just going to
mm,
keep going. And I've
right.
always been that way. So I've always believed that you are molded into a version of yourself based on like your practices, your daily habits, and your
Mm,
discipline, right? And that's probably where I've been confident in my ability to keep my head down and get to work.
mm. Yeah, and that's huge, man, because if you like, I think it's, I mean, what a thing to be confident. Like, what an attribute to associate with yourself. Like, this is the thing that is like me, and I can do that. Because as you were talking, I kind of had like a little mini light bulb moment where, like, so many artists have insecurities, right? I mean, everybody has insecurities, but like, I think when you're an entrepreneur and an art or an artist or doing anything that's off the beaten path, those you're like purposefully inviting those insecurities in to to grapple with because that you just don't have a safety blanket. And I think it's like almost like the people who have the audacity to believe that they deserve better in life, better than this shitty job that they don't really like, or who just don't want to settle for a mediocre experience. And I don't mean mediocre in the sense of like materially. I mean like mediocre in the sense of like your state of being mediocre. Like that's a big thing that I think about a lot. I'm like, I don't want to just be like fine. Like I want to be like ecstatic as much as
Yeah.
possible. Like it's like
Yeah.
what the fuck else is so like, and I think the people who have, if you have the audacity to believe that you're worthy of more than just like a shitty 9 to 5 job that you don't enjoy, then you're probably more likely, because you have that audacity. It's like the Matrix. You take the red pill and then you see the totality of like, oh damn, I'm actually like really insecure about this, or actually like I don't know if
Yeah.
I believe in myself in this way. And you start asking questions that other people who maybe don't have that audacity, or maybe they just genuinely enjoy that lifestyle and that's like totally fine. They don't even need to like grapple with those questions. So I guess what I'm saying is that I feel like I almost feel it's like a paradox, but I almost feel like insecurity is the doorway into greater self trust and confidence. It's like it shows you where you can grow. Like if you're really insecure about something and it keeps coming up and it's constantly on your mind, like I don't know if I'm going to make it, or like that means that that's something you really care about, and then that's an opportunity to pick a belief set that's going to help you achieve goals in that area.
Yeah,
So,
it could be something you really believe in. It could also just be your ego saying like, no, I can overcome this, right? Like I can
mm,
deal with whatever it is that I'm struggling with. And it's funny like that you even call it self-love, because I feel like historically I've always had trouble with self-love. Like I've had actually like, just I've been very hard on myself, and like my ability to get to work and put my head down, as I'm saying, like comes at the expense of sometimes like taking care of myself, or
mm,
just like talking to myself in a way that I would never talk to a friend to. And I think so I think that honestly to some degree, and self-love has been a very like important piece of my like last year of my life or so, and I've taken it like super seriously, the way that I took like engineering very seriously at one point. Like I've
right.
been taking self-love super seriously, and looking back at like my music production journey, like I do think that I was almost like silencing a part of myself to succeed in an industry at almost any cost. Like I
Mm,
didn't care that I was sitting in a chair for 12 hours a day, right? Like that alone is like one of the most unhealthy things you could do to your body, right?
yep.
And I had some level of balance. Like I still would go for runs and lift weights and like do things like that, but I didn't invest into a standing desk until like 8-9 years into this musical journey. So yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like I'm rambling at this point, but I feel like my point is that self-love or lack of self-love may have actually helped me a little bit
Mm,
as I was like working my way up. And I think the problem with that though is that it is unsustainable, and eventually you burn out, and eventually like you just can't keep that going. And I think I did
right.
pay that price to some degree after a while, but yeah, man, I feel like it's very different these days. And I've been producing a lot of music in the past like month or two, and I've been having so much fun with it. And yeah, I've been like a lot more kind to myself. Like I just kind of like go off of the feelings and the inspiration that I experience in the moment. And if it's there, I'll work. If not, I'll just do something that I enjoy, you know?
Mm. Yeah. Do you think, well, okay, so I want to get back to what you just said about the difference between how you feel producing now and when it was like all or nothing and it was like this big thing that you were trying to do. Because now it's, it's not also not your main source of income. So there isn't that financial pressure and stuff.
For
So I
sure.
do want to come back to that, but I just want to quickly touch on the self-love thing. It's funny because I know what you mean. Like some of the ways that I've pushed myself the most have actually come from a place of deep unworthiness, where I feel like if I don't do this, if I don't achieve this, or I don't put my head down and work, and I can't look myself in the mirror at the end of the day and say that was a productive ass day, then like
Right.
somehow I'm not even like worth my own kindness and love. Like, like going back to the thing you were talking about like if you took a week to just like play video games and smoke weed and eat cake or whatever, like yeah, okay, you would feel physically bad because like you're like you would chemically be like fucking up your body's ability to feel good. But like how much of like to really allow yourself to do that and fully accept yourself, I think that's a key part of the self-love. But I also think the thing that like what you said about your ambition being driven by a lack of self-love, I think there's so many layers to it, because on one level that's true, but I feel like in my own experience, at a deeper one level deeper than that, the only reason I'm doing all these things and maybe not going to the gym or not taking care of myself is because deep down, I just really care about myself and I care about my life and I care about my success. And I feel like it's the energy is just being misguided, right? Because maybe culturally I was told, or at a certain age, I was told that I need to have this success or this amount of money or whatever. And so it's like all this love and care for myself actually is going to the wrong thing, when really like it should just be staying home on myself. So I just think it's like there's so many layers to self-love. Like I agree with what you
Yeah.
said, and at the same time I'm like, if I think about like all the times that I've pushed myself beyond the point that's like healthy for me, deep down it's just because it is like an act of self-love. It's just like a
Yeah.
misguided version of it.
Right. And you can really take that pretty far, because I would think that almost everything that I'm doing that maybe has been negative in my life, like, yeah, is a form of like doing it for a version of myself. Like something as simple as like experiencing anxiety and then reaching for some alcohol, right? A social lubricant, right? Like that's the
Right.
most simple like example I feel like that almost anybody can relate to. It's like, yeah, you feel a little uncomfortable, but because you're a human being and you want to relate to other humans and you want to make friends and you want to be social, like you reach for this little beverage that sort of numbs you a little bit. Like, is
Yep.
that a bad thing? You know, like, yeah, the result of doing that over and over and over again can turn into someone who's like an alcoholic. Um,
Right.
but at its core, right? And even someone, right, who like becomes a drug addict, like I think at their core, their intentions behind it weren't negative. They were just trying to probably feel love or relate or connect. And I feel like when you start thinking about it from that perspective, it gives me a lot of empathy and a lot of like almost like sympathy, really for anyone, right? And I think
Yeah.
that that's a very healthy place to look at it. And I feel like honestly, like talking to you when like I had some shit go down in my life like a year ago, you were the one kind of starting to like share that perspective with me, and it really did open things up and made me realize that a lot of the things that I've been doing in my life, um, do come from a place of love, and it's just like you
Mm.
said, a little bit misguided at times.
Dude, it's yeah, I mean, I was getting like chills as you were talking about that, because it's the ultimate key to forgiveness of yourself and others, and then that forgiveness allows for that compassion that you were talking about to spontaneously come up, because it is our natural state. I mean, some people may disagree with me, but like I definitely feel like our natural state as human beings is to be cooperative and to help each other. There are people that say that we evolved to be savages and like we just want to, I think we have that inside of us too, because at the end of the day we're animals and evolution is not always like a compassionate thing. But I think that's what makes us human. Like we've evolved these prefrontal cortexes and these like intense emotional systems and this ability to look at ourselves and have a conscience. And that's what makes us different from other animals. And I feel like, I mean, we've talked quite a bit about like relationship stuff too. And like, I know for me that I look back at the way that I conducted myself in certain ways in relationships, or even going back to the music thing of like, oh, like I was so like neglecting my body to just like produce for hours or whatever. Or even like, oh, I was so controlling in this relationship, or I can't believe that I was that needy, or I can't believe that I was like, and it's almost like you look back and you just cringe. You're like, like, like I can't believe that was me. Like,
Yeah.
fuck. And it's like so hard to accept. But then if you can just look at it from the lens of that was that was the best I could do at the level of awareness that I was at that time. And everything that I was doing was just like coming from a place of love. And then it's just like ultimate forgiveness and compassion. And then eventually you can look at the other person who's involved in the same way, and like going
Yeah.
back to your thing about alcohol, it's like in that moment, you're like, I feel anxious. I reach for the drink. Maybe some part of my brain is like, I shouldn't be doing that because it's not healthy or whatever. But deep down, it's just because like there's some part of you that, like you said, it just wants to connect, and it's like feeling a little like awkward and nervous, and it's like adorable, it's like you're like parenting yourself, like. So I love that we're talking about this because it's so important. And actually, not to turn this into like a this type of podcast, but I think it's like exactly what the entire world needs right now. There's so much separation, like everybody is just so identified with their point of view, and we need to just take a step back and be like, why do I give so much of a shit about telling people that they should or shouldn't get the vaccine? Maybe there's like something in me that just like wants to feel heard, and it's not even about the science at this point. It's just about that, like, there's a little kid in there that just like wants people to respect him, and like, and that's
Yeah.
the other person on the other side of the fence is feeling the same way.
Yeah, man. I mean, Mark
So
Manson, right? You've got a limited amount of fucks to give, so
right.
you better, prioritize the fucks that you can give. And I've felt that way for a while, and I feel like sometimes people get even angry at me for my disinterest in politics or, yeah, just like current events. Like I do care about them. I just feel like there's a lot of things that I'm working on and things that I'm building or creating that take precedence over like, yeah, sharing my, to be honest, like, and frank, my uneducated opinion about things like the vaccine or
Right.
Afghanistan. Like I'm interested in it, but I don't really know the answers. And to be honest, I don't think like really anyone does. And I feel like, yeah, the like to me, a true sign of intelligence is to openly admit that you realize you know nothing. And that's been the case of like the further I go into almost any topic, the more that I realize that I don't know shit.
Mm, yeah.
But yeah.
There's a beautiful Zen. I'm a big proponent of Zen, which I think I've spoken to you about before. But there's a beautiful Zen story where, like, so there's a Zen master. He's living alone in solitude on the top of a hill in ancient Japan, and then this very successful, like, rich businessman sought him out because he was very successful in the world, but he was just so miserable inside, and he didn't feel fulfilled. He didn't feel at peace. So he travels this long distance to go see the Zen master, and he goes all the way up the mountain, travels night and day, and finally gets there. And he walks into the Zen master's home, and the Zen master is just sitting there pouring himself a cup of tea. And the rich man says, "I've come here to learn your secrets of peace and enlightenment, because I've done everything that society told me would make me happy, and I'm still miserable. And so, like, yeah, if you have any ideas, I would love to hear them." And so the Zen master says, "Okay, yeah, sit down, like, let's talk, and I'll pour you a cup of tea." So he gives him the cup, and he starts pouring him the cup of tea. And he keeps pouring it, and the rich man is looking at the cup of tea and watching it getting filled with tea. And it's approaching the brim, and all of a sudden it gets to the brim, and the Zen master just keeps pouring the tea, and now it's just like flooding out of the top of the cup, and it's just deluging out and flooding out and flooding out. And this continues for like 2 minutes. Like, he's just wasting this tea. It's just coming out of the cup. And finally the man can't take it anymore, and he just yells. He loses it, and he's like, what are you doing? Like, can't you see it's already full? Like, why are you still doing this? And the Zen master just calmly puts it down and he says, this cup of tea is like your mind, so full of ideas and opinions and assumptions and beliefs. There's nothing that I can tell you that will help you until you empty your mind, because I can't fill it with anything because it's just already full. And and he's like, that's why you reacted even like when I did that, because, and it was just, I just love that idea of like, just really having that humility throughout your life.
Yeah, it's almost like. And by the way, I love how articulate and well spoken you are, and just your ability to like casually share like a Zen story like that. Like you're the man. But yeah, it's almost like ego dissolution. Like that for me. I also do not need more, right? Like I actually feel very much the opposite. Like I think the less that I incorporate into my life at times, the better I can like feel about myself. Um, not to get into psychedelics, I feel like this is where all like conversations end up going into, but I feel like if that is how I felt when the first time that I did psychedelics, which was a sense of like myself was actually nowhere to be found, like the ego was sort of like gone, and I felt so open to all ideas and to all sorts of like um potential, and just like I felt like this like empty sponge that was ready to absorb so much. Like that feeling was the most peaceful feeling I think I've ever felt in my life. And if that's even a hint of maybe what this monk is talking about, like I'm all in. Like I'm
Right.
buying.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the ego dissolution piece, and actually, it's something I wanted to talk about with you, because a lot of art. I mean, obviously, this is the 6th episode, so the podcast is still growing, but a lot of so far, it's like a lot of artists and creative people, which is not surprising. And uh, speaking to the ego piece, I want to take it back a bit to let's go back to like when you were focusing on being an artist, right? Like Hyperbits is now the name of your school, and it's still the name of your artist project, but at the time that was your project. And then you had the Rooftop Boys, which is a duo that you were part of, that was super dope. And like, let's just go back to what what do you think was motivating you as an artist, and how much of it do you think was based, and how much of it do you think was service based? And maybe those don't need to be so separate, like maybe that's like a Venn diagram. And then I really want to dive into like your experience of pursuing that so hard with so much discipline, like you've said that you did, and then eventually pivoting and starting a school that has now helped so many people, myself being one of them. And like the first guest on this podcast was Anson, who we both know really well, and he's like crushing it now. And he was in my class, and it's I can imagine that having that school must be very fulfilling to see how many people you're helping. Um, yeah, just talk about like all this discipline and hard work that you were applying to your artist project and now are applying to the school. Do you feel like the motivation for why you work so hard has changed over that course of going from trying to be an artist to starting the school and
Yeah,
moving more into education?
totally. I think for me the artist project was very uh ego driven, not in like a negative way. I just, like we were saying, like I wanted to feel important, right? I wanted to feel loved. And I think, like go attending a festival and like seeing some of your favorite artists like play these shows, playing these songs that they wrote, like, and thousands of people like singing along, like I would imagine that to be one of the best feelings. And like that was enough motivation for me to like, after a festival, sit down and just be like, okay, like I want to get there at some point. Like I would love to be making a living off of art that I'm creating and sharing with the world. And I think a lot of people think that, like, at least a lot of artists I talk to think that they're like sharing this gift with the world of like their music and their creations. And like I think that is true, and music does help a lot of people, but my experience of creating music was very uh like selfish. Like I wanted to share my music because I wanted to feel that yeah, sense of like appreciation. Or I mean, how do you quantify, like what are some words that you would use to like describe that feeling of like hearing your music played and loved by all these people? I mean, it's one of the biggest ego boosters you could have, right?
it's like completely validates my existence at the end of the day. Like it's like like going back to the whole thing about being full of ideas and assumptions. Like I try to remain empty, and I do a lot of meditation to try to continue to be as humble and empty as I can. But at the end of the day, like I do have a worldview and a whole ideology around like how art is what I'm on this earth to do, and like I need to be an artist and all that stuff. And yeah, I think it's really refreshing to hear you talk so honestly about the fact that it can be a very selfish uh, pursuit, and there's nothing wrong with being selfish. I think you do need to be selfish to a certain degree to feed yourself and feed your soul, so that you can then be of service to others. But it reminds me of my one of my best friends asked me this question a while ago, and it was so triggering, man. And I've brought it up on the podcast before because it's just like it was such a triggering question. He was like, we were talking about this very thing. Like I was just like, yeah, you know, like I love making music, but sometimes I'm just like, is this the best use of my time in terms of how privileged I am, and like in terms of this life situation that I was born into and everything that I've been given and provided for me? Is this, with all the resources that I have and all the tools and education, everything, like, is this really the best use of an hour to like being able to making beats? Or could I be doing something to really help a lot of people in a more tangible way? And, you know, he said something to me that he said basically like, you have to do what you love, and it's okay to be selfish, but imagine you wrote the best album of all time. Like imagine you wrote an album that's like beats all the records, and you know people are just like loving it, people are getting married to this album, like it's just this like amazing magnum opus of work, but no one would ever know that it was you. And you just, it would be anonymous, or better, worse yet, somebody else would get the credit, like maybe someone you don't like some
Yeah.
contemporary of yours, like who's also an artist. But and then he was basically like, would you do it? Like, would you say yes to that? And that's obviously an extreme example, but I got so triggered because I was like, damn, like that would suck.
It would
Like the
suck.
fact, like my aversion to that showed me how much I do care about people knowing that it was me, you know? And like, that's just something to reckon with, I think, like where I don't think we're the only ones, but
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, it would suck, and it would be so hard to like, yeah, live in a world where like that constant reminder of like something that you created and you don't get credit for. Like it would just be it'd be like it'd be torture, really. Like, you know, and I wish it wasn't. Like I really wish that I could just sit here and be like, no, man, like it's cool. Like I, it's like I created it and I helped all these people. Um, and maybe I'd have to come to peace with it, or eventually find a way to like be okay with that, because I'd have to anyway. But yeah, it would be extremely hard. And I feel like I talk openly about, you know, the selfish pursuit of artists because I've actually been around, you know, so many students, and I see it to some degree. Like, and I think that this is where things like, you can have the same end goal but completely different reasons as to how, or motivations as to how you want to get there. And I think one thing that you've done really well, and really just like incredibly honestly, is like building a community around, you know, your values and the things that you align with, and like the types of conversations that you want to be having with people, while also sharing that message like through your music, right? And that's a very different way to go about like trying to get that love and that validation through your art form than to just like be releasing singles and like posting pictures of like, you know, girls' butts on Instagram. Like there's just a very different way to go about that. And again, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but I do think that you are trying to leave a mark on the world that is a more positive one, you know, than someone who's just like literally trying to get famous and have sex with a lot of women, right? Like
mm,
there's a very different way about going about that. And I'm not gonna lie that like there was a part of me that was like, oh, like, because when I started my artist project, I was single at the time, and I remember thinking like, oh, like if I'm just like successful, right, and important, like women, like that part of my life will be completely taken care of, you know.
yep,
And that
yep,
definitely was like a thought I had. It wasn't like the reason that I got into music, but it was definitely like an underlying thought, like, oh, if I'm the DJ, man, like, you know, like I'll meet some girls, like it's all gonna, you know. And like I
right.
think that that is that is, if anybody says that that doesn't motivate them a little bit, like they're probably lying. I would imagine.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, like
Like,
just Dude, I feel like every great thing in civilization is like low key just motivated by like dudes trying to get laid, or like any great thing that a man has done. I mean, like just like entire like civilizations or like wars fought over women and just all this stuff, and it's so true. Like I can completely relate to that, and I still grapple with it because I'm a man with sexual desires, and like and also we're in a culture that really does communicate certain messages about what makes you valuable as a man, and those messages are so strong that then you'll meet women and you'll meet other men that are also reinforcing that, so it can be very easy to fall into that, and I constantly find myself falling into that still, like, you know, even something as seemingly, like, this is almost like embarrassing, like something as seemingly benign as like if I have like a crush on a girl or something, and then I find out that she's like a huge fan of some artist that's like way bigger than me. It's like at that moment, if I start getting insecure, which is a totally reasonable thing to do given the messaging that we're given by culture and society, but I've totally lost the plot of like in my experience what is truly valuable to human beings, which is not like your fame or success. It's just like how you make someone feel in your presence, which is something that can totally be cultivated independent of how successful you are. But it is totally a thing, and it's also like, yeah, I guess, like, I mean, you reached a certain level of success. Like you were getting, you did big remixes for Beyonce and all these big artists, and you were getting shows and remix opportunities. Do you feel like the veil was kind of like lifted a little bit and you realize like, oh, it's actually not what it's cracked up to be, or maybe I did get the things that I wanted, but now there's like more things that I want that are like another level of it, like I guess what when did you start to realize like, okay, this is a dream that I'm happy I pursued, but it's not necessarily for me anymore, specifically the artist thing.
Yeah, I think the artist thing, there was a combination of a couple things. Like number one, I had just gone on like a legitimate proper like tour. You know, I'd done like 2 weeks around the US, uh playing gigs with my other production partner at the time, with the Rooftop Boys. And I got back from that, like, honestly, similarly depleted the way that I felt after, that week between Christmas and New Year's when I did nothing for a few days, right? Like I felt just so far removed from what made me feel good, which is to, like, honestly, wake up early, meditate, eat clean, exercise, like have valuable conversations or meaningful conversations. Um, yeah, like it made me feel so far removed from what I wanted to feel like. And part of that was my own problems, which I probably could have addressed. Like I felt for some reason like I had to be, quote unquote, the life of the party as a DJ. So I was out late, going to
Mm,
after parties, like, just not keeping a schedule and, partying, things like that. Um, but it also was just a straight up grind. You're flying. I think it's one thing if you're the chain smokers or something like they are now, but like I wasn't flying in private jets. I was flying coach, and I was renting cars, and I was, going from gig to gig, like showing up for my own sound check. Like it's not like I had a tour manager like doing anything for me. And I just remember coming home from that and being like, wait a second, like I have been working for the past like 5-6 years of my life, like to get to this point where I can make a living off of playing shows and playing gigs and touring the country and the world. And then I was like, but I didn't even enjoy it.
mm,
Like I like, was there moments that probably made it worth it? Maybe, like that there's those moments where you make play a song that you wrote or created and the whole crowd is going nuts to it. And that's a really, like you said, like super, it validates like my existence. It makes me feel incredible, but it wasn't enough to counteract the way that I had felt after that whole tour. And
mm,
then pair that with the fact that, like, I couldn't get along with my production partner. We just were such different people. And yeah, it got to the point where he actually sent me a cease and desist letter to try to like get me to stop doing remixes under our like Rooftop Boys name, because yeah, we just like couldn't get along, and so he wanted to like take a break from working together. And meanwhile, like, he's living at home, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I was living in Brooklyn at the time and I had rent to pay and I had bills and stuff. And, we were getting like anywhere between like $2,000 and $5,000 to do a remix at the time. And we had like 4 remixes like on our plate, like ready to go, or all we had to do was deliver it to the label. And I went ahead and started tackling them because I'm like, dude, like we can figure this out. Like, let's find a way to work this out. But he didn't want to. And so he sent me a cease and desist letter. All of a sudden I'm hiring a lawyer. And I just was like, man, like the music industry, even when it was working, like and good, like it wasn't good, right? Like it just was like, I couldn't believe the amount of like difficulties that I was running into. And it was at that moment that I had already been doing like a decent amount of education stuff on the side. I had been doing one-on-one lessons for a little while. I think at that point I had already ran one iteration of the first Hyperbits Masterclass and maybe 2 or something, but it was super early still. And at that moment, I just decided I was like, I'm going to try to pivot into this education space because it felt like there was a lot less resistance. Um, it felt a lot easier and it felt like the amount of like, again, it all comes back to like what made me feel better, what made me feel more loved. Like all these music producers were hitting me up all the time being like, dude, the tutorials you're putting together are so helpful. Like so many people like don't explain music production the way that you do, right? Like all these things that I've been like wanting to hear in terms of like making me feel important were happening on the education side of things and weren't really happening as much on the artist side of things. And I felt like the artist pursuit for me at the time was like me pushing my head against the universe, just like fighting it. Whereas like the education side was so smooth and just like so simple.
Mm.
Um, and so that paired with the fact that like I felt like I was building more of like a community, and had more just like more connection and yeah, like honestly gratification from it. I decided to just like pivot and really go all in and see how that like would treat me for a little while, and I ended up absolutely loving it. Like it was kind of this I forget, I think Ramit Sethi said something along the lines of like you can be the best in the world at something and no one really cares, but if you're really good at the cross section of a bunch of different industries, you can be the best in the world at that cross section and like everybody will care. And I completely butchered the quote, but it's something like that.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
felt like all of a sudden I was like, wait a second, like I'm pretty good at music production. I happen to be a pretty good like communicator and educator. And I'm happening to be pretty decent at like marketing and entrepreneurship, which maybe I owe a little bit to that pharmaceutical marketing job that I had. I think I did learn a decent amount there. So
Right.
all of a sudden I'm like, oh, like there's probably not that many people in the world doing all 3 of those things and doing them fairly well. And so at
Mm.
that point, I just kind of went all into that like education space. And it wasn't really that hard for me at the time to let go of like the artist pursuit, like it's kind of like once you catch that ick, of just like something feeling a little off, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that hard for me to make that transition.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I mean I don't like regret it or anything like that. I'm like super super grateful for like the amount of friends and just like people that I've met as a result of starting a school, whether it be students of the class like you and Anson, right, or other business owners who have reached out to me for like partnerships, and then we end up talking about like life and like relationships and our struggles and like supporting each other. And I just feel like the community that I've entered on the entrepreneurship space, um, I wouldn't give up for the world, all the way
Yeah.
up until the point now where I'm living in this entrepreneur house, which you got
Oh
to
yeah.
visit for a weekend.
Yep.
Which, by the way, for anyone listening to this, Ashish ate 27 tacos in 3.5 days when he was here in San Diego. I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that. That is an impressive feat. I I don't know if it could ever be repeated, but you pretty much ate every good San Diego taco and fish taco that exists. So
I
good
mean, I
good
had
job.
to. Like, you took me to all the best spots. I was like, I don't come to San Diego often. Definitely not with this taco tour guide extraordinaire. So,
Yeah. Yeah, you killed it. Well, I wouldn't change a thing, man.
yeah. Dude. Okay. Yes. Thank you for bringing up that. I definitely want to talk about the entrepreneur house. but there's so much gold in what you said. And yeah, I mean, it's just that was so full of wisdom, and I just think it's so important for artists to hear that, because it's such a romantic dream, this concept of being an artist. And it's not, and I'm not trying to dissuade anyone from going for it. I mean, I'm still going for it, so like it's not like
Yeah,
I'm saying
totally.
like that people shouldn't do it, but just to constantly be checking in with yourself the way that you were doing throughout this whole process, like when you got back from tour, just like taking a moment to be like, I feel like shit. Like I gotta change something. Like it's like it's not enough for this just because I'm satisfying some idea in my head that I like reached this dream or whatever. Like if I'm not feeling good, then that's worth checking in on yourself for. And also, I think, from what I know about you, based on like now, I am very grateful that we were friends. We've cultivated this a friendship, but even just as your student in the past, and even just the music that you've made and how technically good it sounds, and just watching you produce and things like that, I think it's also really important to try to connect to what is fun, like what is actually exciting for you day to day. That's like something that you can just feel excited about doing on a day-to-day basis. And I feel like one of those things for you, correct me if I'm wrong, is I think you just actually love to produce music. Like you love to write songs, but you love to produce and like figure out techniques and the technical side of it. And then, like you said, you discovered through the process of starting the school that you also have an aptitude for communicating that information and teaching it. And that's something you enjoy. And you also had the aptitude for entrepreneurship and marketing. But, I think that's something that seems like it's just genuinely fun for you. And you can do it. You found a way to do it in a way that's sustainable and doesn't sacrifice your health and your mental wellness and all those things. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because I think it's just your story is really inspiring in the sense that you just continue to narrow down on these are the things that are fun, and these are the things that, like, if we just forget about the service aspect of it, of like, am I helping the world or whatever, because if you really want to zoom out, like, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, it's like, what, just enjoy yourself because the sun's gonna explode. So like, but like, if we just forget about that, like, just figuring out what you enjoy and just doing that, and then again, like, emptying yourself of the ideas of what it means, or what the implications are. That's a process that I actually have really been going through this year with music, where I took another class. There's a deep house DJ named Lee Foss, and he has a label called Repopulate Mars, and they do like a production masterclass where they have, like, John Summit was one of my teachers, like all these like active DJs, and it's a really dope class. But what I learned, and I learned a lot, which is cool. But what I realized doing that, and then also being down in Tulum last year and having a residency and DJing like twice a week, and just like really being in that scene, I realized, like, yeah, okay, this is fun and it's like validates my existence, all that stuff. But very similar to what you said, like, I don't like partying like that. And like, I'm not a socialite. I'm not the kind of person who like can just like be part of a scene and is just like the in with all the cool people in the scene. And like, that's just not naturally what I want to do if left to my own devices. Like, if left to my own devices, I want to wake up, like, spend the first 5 hours of the day like walking around listening to podcasts and just like having a very like unstructured morning, and then working on some music, having some conversations with people, like you said, helping people in that way. Those are the things that I find fun, that nourish my soul. And so my goals have really changed. Like, I'm literally just like, I would almost say, like, I don't even necessarily have goals in the way that I did. I just have like systems and processes that I am constantly refining. But it's just like, how can I just wake up today and just do things that are fulfilling and happy?
Yeah.
And then, if as a byproduct of that, I suddenly have a touring career like you did, I'll see what happens. And if I like it, and I probably, like, this might sound kind of like presumptuous, but like, unless I am touring at the level where I can be like in a private jet and be drinking like spring water and like, like just like living that lifestyle, like, I don't know if I would really like touring either. Cause I'm just not that passionate about like the tour life. And I've discovered that. And I had to let go of that dream by just observing my own experience and realizing, like, yeah, I actually don't like just constantly like not getting good sleep and like being uncomfortable and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Like letting whatever is fun dictate and be this like guiding principle in your life. Like I've actually unknowingly been doing this very much with like my relationships, just like friends and acquaintances and things like that for a very long time. And I realized that
mhm,
like my guiding principle about whether I want to spend time with someone or not is like, how do I feel like immediately after saying goodbye to them? Like immediately after I get home and I just was like, okay, like I just spent the afternoon with this person or I just spent the night with this person. Like, how do I feel? And it's so
mhm,
simple. It's like, if I feel better, I'll hang out with them again. And if I
yep.
felt worse, like I don't really want to spend time with them. And it's like, it sounds so
So simple.
simple,
Like it's like too
but it
simple.
yeah,
Right.
but it's been a really incredible like compass or like guiding system, I guess, for what I would consider to be an incredible tribe of humans that I feel like I have in my life right now. Like I
Mhm.
really can confidently say that that's probably the thing that I'm most proud of is just like the company that I keep, the friends that I've made,
Wow.
the people that show up, when things are good or bad. It's just the people that I keep in my life. I'm like so passionate about, and I love them to death. And like, um, yeah, it's all just been that one thing. And I think when you zoom out and look at everything in life, obviously to some degree, there's a you have to be responsible. You can't just be like, oh, like work isn't fun, so I'm not going to show up.
Right.
Um, but if that was your end goal and you recognize the fact that like you don't like your job, then allowing yourself that grace to recognize that and to be like, yeah, I need to change something. Letting that be the
Right.
guiding principle of your life is totally one of the most incredible ways to, I think, um, find ways to enjoy life. Because at the end, like we have one of the guys who you met and that lives in this house that I'm in, Trevor. He's just always talking about dream life. It's just
Mm,
like whenever there's a decision to be made, like what is your dream life? Like what makes you feel like so amped? Like when's the last time that you got out of bed so excited to wake up? Like, what
right.
is that thing? And I could genuinely ask you, like, when's the last time you woke up and you're just like, oh my God, I can't wait for today?
Yeah. That's a great question. I would say, oh, man, I mean, you might have just given me like a little mini revelation. Like, honestly, working like I do some dating coaching on the side, which I told you about. I think when we were in San Diego, and it's not like dating coaching, like pickup coaching, like which is like its own thing. It's more like intimacy coaching and helping people just feel more comfortable with themselves, but in person. So like working with like a male and a female, and I remember last year in Ukraine, when I was there for 2 weeks working, and I just remember being so pumped every day to get to class, which was basically like us working with our male students. There were six clients and female models, and just like helping them both feel comfortable and like doing live feedback and a lot of different breathwork exercises and all that stuff. And I guess that's what it is, man. I mean, even though, and I am doing that a bit on the side, and I think long term, going back to what you were saying about combining different things, like the Ramit Sethi thing, I think that is like my long term vision. I guess it's not fully fleshed out yet, but like, how can I combine music with that and create these situations where people can connect to their deeper selves with music as an aid?
Yeah, and
I would
and
say
how
that.
awesome. I was just gonna say, and how awesome is it that the thing that you're most excited about, or that you feel super amped about, actually does provide a service and does help people. Like that's
Yeah.
a pretty incredible little niche or just cross section right there.
Yeah, man. And I mean, I think the same goes for you and your school. And I actually, something you said just a second ago that I thought was super powerful. Like, you are somebody that has built a very successful business. Like, you have a really great lifestyle. You had your success as an artist earlier as well. There's a lot of things that you should and can be proud of. And I just want to acknowledge the fact that the thing you said you were the most proud of was not any of those things. It was the community of friends that you've built. And that, I think that speaks out volumes, for someone who's maybe a little younger, or even for me, it really impacted me, like to just realize, if I think about it too, yeah, the thing that I'm most proud of is probably just showing up for my friends in the way that I do. And that's like a group that's like under 10 people that I'm talking about. It's like a
Yeah.
very tight knit like crew of people, but just like really being there for them and inspiring them and knowing that their life is being enriched by my presence. Like that's super powerful. And I think it's just like we're just social animals. That's clearly the most important thing. You know, it's like so many studies have been written about this, and like the blue zone countries, they're all the thesis of that book that they concluded with was that it's not the diet, it's not exercise. It's like they all have completely different diets. It's just like literally community is like the thing that causes the longevity. Um, so yeah, I guess we'll wrap this up shortly, but I guess maybe the last thing we can touch on is that's a good segue to talk about the growth house, because you remember like how much my mind was like constantly blown when I stayed with you guys for 2 weeks or for a weekend a couple weeks ago, because yeah, I just think your living situation is super unique and dope and alternative. So just tell the people about what the house is that you're living in, what the community's like, and what it's been like for you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, see, like this is like I'm getting a little like excited just to share. Like, and this is just my living situation, you know, and I'm like super proud of this. But basically I moved into an entrepreneur house about a year ago. And so an entrepreneur house it was something that I was super unfamiliar with, but basically it's a 6-bedroom house here in San Diego, and it's just a bunch of business owners living together with shared values and supporting each other on, our journeys. And I think a lot of people's first thought is like, oh, it sounds kind of fratty, um, but it's actually incredible. And I think I've learned more about life and about myself in the past, 9, 10 months that I've been here than in any part of my life in the past. And it's been honestly like it's just been one of the coolest things I've ever been a part of. So like on a very like I guess systems basis, we have a private chef, right? So like Monday through Friday, we've got this guy, his name's Raf. He's so talented. He used to
That
be
food is delicious.
his
It's so good.
his he used to work for as a chef for Airbnb, and then he worked as a chef here in San Diego at this really like nice bougie restaurant called Kettner Exchange. He's super overqualified, but he makes our food Monday through Friday, and we all as a house eat all organic, paleo, which just really just means like lean meats, whole foods, vegetables, fruits, and everything's organic or grass fed. And like, yeah, like that's one piece of the equation that I sort of don't have to worry about anymore. And that's it's a big piece, like feeling healthy and eating clean food. Like I don't feel like I've ever been as healthy as I am now. And it's because like that piece of the puzzle is on autopilot. And I still have
Mm.
the weekends to, have little cheat meals and things like that. But
27 tacos.
yeah, eating 27 tacos in 2.5 days, which by the way, that you ate 27. I think I had more
Right.
like 22 or something.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like so we've got the food kind of you know, dialed in, and then we have cleaners that come twice a week. We've got our laundry done for us, and we even have like a little gym in the garage. We've got a sauna. There's some really cool little perks like that. But I think the coolest thing about the house is that every Monday night we just sit down and have like a quote unquote mastermind, which is really just like, you know, all the people in the house sitting down, going over like any house issues that might have come up, things we want to talk about. We hand out props or like acknowledgments, so just like recognizing each other for little cool things that maybe someone's done or helped, or just even just like sometimes acknowledging someone for like, I don't know, how great their fitness has been lately, right? Just like communicating that we see you, right? Like it's like I see you and I
Mm.
want to call that out. And then we each go around and share one business problem and one personal problem. And it's like having a board of directors of your life to help you work through it. So the feeling that you get from like therapy, you come out of therapy feeling pretty light and good because you just like released all this energy.
Mm.
I feel like I get that like, 10x after these mastermind sessions. Like I go to bed on Monday night feeling so fulfilled and happy and like uh warm, because it's like I just sat in a room connecting with other people who truly give a shit.
Hmm.
Um and that level of support is really making me question like the classic model of like how you can go about living your life. Like I'm feeling so fulfilled and so complete. um and I'm not in a relationship right now. I'm a single dude, and yet I feel extremely full, and I feel like my life
Mm,
has plenty of meaning and purpose without being in a relationship. And I bring that up just because I went through a big breakup a year ago, and it completely demoralized me. So
mm.
to get to this point where I feel so whole and so complete, I feel like I owe it so much to, yeah, just this house and like what the core values are of this house. And it ended up, yeah, like I said, it's the best thing that I've like ever been a part of, I think.
That's so beautiful, man. I mean, yeah, I'm so happy that you shared that on the podcast, and I think that's maybe a good place to end. But I know that when I saw the way that you guys first of all, everything you described is amazing. Like all the perks are great, and and the check-ins are amazing. But I think the thing that stood out to me the most is just, yeah, there was just such a clear sense of family and support for each other, and also authenticity. Like you guys seem to all just be very real with each other, which I think is so important and probably unavoidable when you're living with people. Um, and yeah, man, I think that sense of community, especially now with COVID and everything, it's so important. And even just what you said about feeling seen goes back to earlier in the conversation. We were talking about all the things that we do that are actually misguided and maybe not the best thing for our soul, but it's a misguided use of our energy because we just are fundamentally trying to fill that hole of being seen. And how different would your life be if you had something like what you have with this house, where it's scheduled into your week that you're gonna be seen every time, so that you don't have that hungry ghost as active inside you, and then you can just make more clear decisions about
Yeah, that's
what to put your energy on.
that's super like observant and wise, I think, that you like, excuse me, that you recognize that. Because yeah, you were there for a few days, but I think you picked up on like, it's almost like all those moments in life when you live alone, or maybe just with a partner or something like that, and you don't have that immediate tribe of just support right there in front of you, right there. How many times have you just ran through an idea and like let it become almost toxic and cyclical, and just like keep working through your head, when in reality, like all you probably needed to do is like call a friend, right? Or just like talk to someone. And I feel like having that support network right here in the house, like when those things do come up, I just go talk to someone. Like someone is probably in the kitchen, like snacking, or someone's around. Like I can usually just like quickly talk through that stuff. And it's amazing. Like I'm almost like blown away how much that helps on like a day-to-day basis, just like
Mm,
to get me, yeah, almost like out of my own, or yeah, out of my head. Uh
right.
it's like a, yeah, it just gets me like emotionally out. Like it's an outlet that allows me to then be more of myself and be more vulnerable, and just like, or comfortable with being vulnerable. So
Totally,
yeah,
man.
it's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it's like you're flushing out the junk
Right.
more often, like rather than just letting it build up. And I mean, yeah, I'm so I think one of the reasons I so like love the idea too is because I've lived alone for 7 years, and I have an amazing group of friends here that is like my squad, like for life. Like I just can feel like this is like my crew now. But like I don't live with them, so it's like it's just different. It's like I do spend a lot of time alone, especially during the week. I just get like busy and whatever. Like, and yeah, I totally can know what you mean about it. It just builds up, and like what starts as one small idea or one little thing that is just like literally just a thought. It's like literally like not a
Yeah.
substantial like piece of matter even, but it just starts off that way. And then if you don't have a way of processing that, it can just turn into this something that then will have implications on your life because you've allowed it to turn into this thing. So
Yeah, it's like a
yeah,
just a distorted, just like a little thought can become this like magnified, distorted thing. Um, and maybe that's not the case for everybody. But for me, I
right.
think there's something about, yeah, like being around people, and like you said, like like humans are tribal creatures, right? We're like, that's one of the things that we're most good at is communication. Um,
Mm,
like like when I think back to like human, you know, like cavemen and like tribes, like what are humans really good at? Like we were good at like doing things in groups, like hunting, right, or gathering berries and stuff. We were good at like sharing stories and just talking and drinking and fucking and just like being human, right? Like
right.
like that to me is the most natural state for us.
Right.
And I feel like this house almost like gets me back to, yeah, that more like natural state. And it's making me realize like how much I love, like what gets me excited. Like let's fucking wake up and go skiing all day. Like let's go jump in a
Yeah.
freezing cold ocean. Like the most alive that I felt in the past year was probably I went surfing in Costa Rica with a bunch of friends, and it just started downpouring on us. Like just like thunderstorm, like, you know, like let's get out of the water as fast as possible. Like, and so we're carrying surfboards, you're driving around in golf carts with no top to them because like that's just
Right.
what they do in Costa Rica. So I'm like
Right.
holding this heavy ass surfboard. It's pouring on me. There's like cars hitting mud patches, like blinding me with like mud. And then I hopped on my buddy's ATV after we dropped off the surfboards, and we're just going up the side of this like mountain, basically, in the jungle with like monkeys everywhere and like rain pouring on me. And then we just got to our house and we were already soaked, and we were like, let's just jump in our pool and just like stay out here. And I just felt
Right.
so fucking alive in that moment, you know? Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's to me, it's like a return to yeah, just being like what makes me feel the most human, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's a beautiful place to leave this off. I will definitely do a part two at some, maybe like in a year. We'll check in again.
All right, sounds good.
But yeah, man. I mean, I thank you so much for coming on, and I think this conversation is going to help a lot of people because, like we started off, like you're you have a very unique story, and you're somebody that has been successful in many ways, and I just think it's so powerful to hear you talk about what truly makes you come alive and how much of it is about community. And I do think that that is what if we do if we evolve correctly, I think like the next evolution for us as humans is an evolution in consciousness so that we can feel more connected and compassionate towards each other. Because success, not that there's anything wrong with success, but success for its own sake, like winning and there being winners and losers, to me is just, it just feels so primitive. It's like, how is that different from any other animal? Like that's just like trying to like fuck and like, can we just like evolve beyond that? Clearly we have the capability to like envision a future that's like more sophisticated emotionally than just that. So yeah, I think that's what you're doing, man. And it's super inspiring for me. I'm so fortunate to call you a friend. And yeah, dude, thanks for coming on the
Dude, well,
show.
dude, right back at you. And the last thing I'll say is that you're everything you're doing super inspirational. Like I absolutely love just like seeing what it is that your mind is talking about, you know, in the way that you're super vulnerable and you share things on, you know, your socials and in person that I think a lot of people like just don't allow themselves to be that vulnerable, and you're doing it like all the time, and it feels so good to be around you and to be able to talk through ideas and just like hear your perspective on life. So yeah, man, I just want to say that like you're doing some really amazing things, and I'm super super grateful to have met you. And like yeah, I'm actually like really looking forward to just being, I think I told you this when you're here, I was like I'm really looking forward, man, to just being friends for our entire lives. And like yeah, like we're gonna have some fucking great experiences together, so I'm pumped.
Hell yeah, dude. Well, that makes me feel very seen. So I appreciate that.
Hell yeah.
And okay, so before we wrap up, I just have a question. You kind of already answered it, but I'll just ask it because it's a question I ask every guest at the end of the show, which is what makes you feel the most free?
The most free, I think the first thing that comes to mind is when I did psychedelics for the first time, and I felt my ego just like dissipate, and I feel like I actually did tap into some sort of, you know, state of love or consciousness where like I didn't fully exist, and it actually felt the most free and loving that I've ever felt. And
Mm,
similarly, I feel like I achieved a very similar sensation after doing some holotropic breath work in Costa Rica. So like those feelings of just like some sort of energy release, ego dissolution, like that probably is the most free I've ever felt.
that's beautiful, man. Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks so much, Serik. Love you lots. And yeah, have a great rest of your day. I'll catch
Yeah,
you
you
soon.
too, man. Thanks for having me.